Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Anyone have any strange human interactions while out? Anything crazy? Can't say I've had any. Oddest I've had is a group of born-again Christians stopping me, preaching me the gospel and telling me to let Jesus into my heart.
Done the old chainless chainsaw trick a few times with mates at communal campgrounds. Chase them with it revving, then procedure to attack while they scream. Always good for a laugh.
I have a very scary then eventually funny story from our van trip in Spain. In Innawoods Mountains north of Madrid. Super quiet, free parking, campgrounds by a small stream. Pitch black and empty, dirt road to get there. About 2 a.m., hear a car pull up and start idling. Strange as we're so remote and it's so late, and nearest main road is miles away. I peek out and see a black saloon with 2 guys sitting in it. They have inside light on, passing shit between each other, looking very shifty. Suddenly they notice the van behind them and slam lights off. I basically fall away from the curtain so they don't see me. My GF waking up, asking what's happening. I say don't worry, be very quiet. At this point the guys are out the car with torches, shining towards the van. I get a good look at them, one huge guy, the other skinny and sort of scruffy looking. They walk up to the van and start looking inside the cab. Separate to our living bit completely, it was a self-build. They are really scrutinizing it, and this is when I start to realize I need to arm myself. I take a long wooden pole out of our beach windbreak that was under the bed, it's sharpened into a stake. My GF is quietly putting her clothes on, kitchen knife in hand. After a good few minutes of them inspecting the van, walking all around it, they say something in Spanish. They start to walk back to their car, turning back to check if we're looking out the window. Satisfied we're not, they open up the boot. What I saw next made my blood run literally cold. Huge black duffel bag, body-sized, in the trunk of this car. They heave it out and it falls to the floor with a thud. I'm thinking now shit, if they even suspect we're witness to whatever they're doing, we are screwed. Preparing to crawl into cab through small opening and drive out of there. Just as I'm about to do it, they open the bag. A mass of beer bottles, hunting, and fishing gear spills out all over the car park. They laugh and one guy starts collecting their shit. The other puts down his torch and in the darkness I see him light the biggest blunt ever. I realize the shady shit they were doing in the car was skinning up a fatty. They were acting paranoid and shady because they were high as shit. They proceeded to drag their gear off out of sight and leave their car totally open. I can hear them talking and laughing all night but eventually sleep. In the morning, I woke up and went outside. They were 20 meters away from our van, fast asleep in hammocks, with a fire still smoldering. Beer bottles, weed bags, food tins, and who knows what else everywhere. I start preparing our shit to leave and park ranger arrives. They get the bollocking of their life, he's kicking their shit, going mad. We kick and drive deeper into the national park.
Decided once to go camping at the last minute, so we went to a usual spot, about a 4 or 5 hour hike up an old closed-off trail to a nice wide river spot. My friend gets sick. It starts to rain and a fire just isn't taken, mainly because we are unprepared and didn't gather any dry tinder on the hike in. Finally get a fire started, get some soup made and cozied in as the rain finally stops. Guy I'm camping with feels a lot better the next day, so he's doing dishes at the river when some kayakers go by and they yell that their friend is banged up, etc., etc. Can we help? They legit just dropped him off with us with a shoulder popped out of socket. He wants to hike back. Water is calm even with the rain the night before, so we start to hike out with the guy. He's complaining the entire time, and I get it, the shoulder and all. But he's basically at this point begging to be carried over shit we were walking around so we don't get lost and all sorts of things. After we finally get back to where we parked and the kayakers were waiting, it's 8 hours later and without so much as a thank you, him and his douche friends just took off, leaving us to hike all night to go get our stuff and hike out the next day. Next time we were there to camp, all the same cars and trucks were parked up at the same spot with their little notes to the ranger or whatever that they are kayakers and blah blah blah. So we did the right thing and let the air out of all their tires on all 3 vehicles we knew for sure were theirs and left a note saying next time at least thank someone when they save your friend in the woods.
2 mild stories. First, show up to Trailhead, only car in the parking lot. Start 10-mile hike into the woods to a lake campsite. About 75% in and we see another group of people. One of them takes off quickly further down the trail. WTF? The remaining people are a young girl no older than 10 and some skinny 20-something woman. Turns out there was another trailhead, making the hike just 2 miles. Arrive at lake. The third person that took off was some 40-something dude, the father of the young girl. The other was the chick he was banging after his divorce. He wanted to get the permanent lean-to first. Not too upset since his kid is there, more confused he would just abandon his women in front of a group of guys in the middle of the woods. Get a fire built, making small talk, another guy comes crashing through the woods. He's barefoot, has a tent and bottle of liquor rolled up in a Mexican blanket, with a giant machete on his hip. Starts babbling /x/tier nonsense and complains his GF dumped him. Wake up pretty early the next morning, weird family is already gone and the oddest is snoring in the dirt outside his tent. Second. Arrive at Trailhead for a trout stream with a couple campsites along the way. As we're unloading, some dude pulls up in a minivan. He opens his van, it's full of 5-gallon buckets and hoses. Pulls out a bucket, an extremely well-read paperback, and a pack of cigarettes. Sits on the bucket, reads his book and just starts chain smoking, watching us. Sits there for maybe 10 minutes, then just tosses his shit back in the van and drives off. I think he might have been a moonshiner hoping we were leaving instead of arriving, only reason I can think of showing up to the woods with that much shit like that.
Linje. Hiking in North Georgia woods along Chattahoochee. Long day after hiking and swimming, so decide to set up camp next to a cave that's jutting out, makes perfect lean-to. Everything is going fine, no rain, no ticks, no water people. Fire dying down as sun sets and I drift off to sleep. Wake up in the middle of night and try to find out why TF my brain turned back on. Rustling noises from the woods and claws scraping on the stones around me. Sounds like some 200-pound man walking around my camp. Doesn't explain scraping though. Can't figure out what's making the clawing noises. Heart is over 200 beats per minute. Grab knife and flashlight and decide to peek out tent to find out who is scuttling around me. Light shines through the pitch black forest and reveals nothing. Sound still emanating throughout the area. Sudden noise of nails on a chalkboard behind tent. Turn around and see nothing again. Peer over tent and see a hairy ring doorbell-shaped object. Spend solid 2 minutes almost pissing myself trying to figure out what this thing is and why the noises are growing louder around me. Ball and coils and out pops Armadillo. Armadillo bro walks out of my cave and I shine my light to reveal a dozen other armadillos. They wander off through the forest sounding like a pack of boars. Almost had heart attack over herd of armadillo bros migrating up north. I didn't get leprosy, so that's a win.
Not me, but my friend was stabbed in the chest by some random guy who wanted to camp with them. Basically, they were at a fairly known camping spot 3 hours north away from Vancouver. Group of guys and girls are chilling having a campfire, when some random American guy comes and asks to join them, which isn't that unusual since it's a popular spot for younger people to party at. He sits with them for a while but starts acting strange, awkwardly coming onto a girl there, saying inappropriate things and making her uncomfortable, so he's asked to leave. Later that night my friends walked to the outhouse, and said he heard something, then felt like he was being punched in the chest, began to fight back and scream. His friends came over and found him bleeding on the floor with the guy gone. Police were called and they found the guy with the knife and blood. Couldn't keep him arrested for some reason. He got back to the States, came back for a court hearing and got away with it by saying his friends were arguing and stabbed him. My friend's heart was missed by 1 inch.
Had a real spooky one once. Walking a part of the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington. I usually stay off the path whenever I can and just follow a map and look for the markers to avoid people. Hear a woman screaming like bloody murder at some point near Leavenworth. I thought it was a mountain lion, so for some reason I climbed a tree cause I figured it's easier to stop and stab the cat if it climbed the tree. Probably a dumb idea, but I got scared. It's getting closer. I can hear it's a woman screaming for help. She comes into view. She's just standing there 100 feet away screaming nonchalantly while walking down the trail. Wonder if I should go help her. Blood-curdling moment when I see 2 guys hiding behind a tree. They're not even looking at her, just up and down the trail. They eventually stop screaming and get out of view. Never had my heart raced that much at a human encounter, but I've had a few scary animal ones too.
I harassed a homeless camp that was ruining my favorite spot. A spot that was untouched until they came along with cheap tents, dime sleeping bags, trash and bags of discards and stolen store merch. Waited till nightfall. Used my thermal optic to sneak up and harass them all night. Did a lot of subtle stuff and escalated as the night went on. Starting around 11, I ramped it up by 1 to 3 a.m. The hardest part was clearing enough debris to stop crunchy footsteps. Took till about 10 to get it all moved. I think one of them might have heard me in the tent, but it was mostly by putting their fire out while they slept and moving stuff. Eventually one of them woke up and started schizoing out when they saw the prints I left. I was barefoot but with a sock on, boots and sneaking around don't mix well. Eventually I was able to throw some bottles around and I sprinted through their camp around 4 a.m. while breathing harshly. They woke and packed. Abandoned everything. Haven't seen them ever again. Great night out if you have nothing to do. I think people forget how odd and unpredictable people can be. For example, this June I may have been some kind of forest cryptid. Leave me on 3-day hike. Wake up, fix water for the morning, pour in electrolyte powder to 2 canteens. 3 hours into 7-hour hike, discover I poured sachets of pot degreaser into water. Try to drink water, vomit, can't keep it down. Push on through to Target as it has a spring. Get extremely dehydrated, begin to vomit towards the end, barely make it. In terrible shape, pounding headache, vomiting etc., fever. Sleep for 12 hours straight, wake up at midnight feeling roasting hot. Lie out on deliciously cool soapstone on hill beside tent, not wearing a stitch because too hot. Have dream about my little brother walking around calling my name. Wake up, realize there really are little kids walking around talking about finding something. I am surrounded by 2 feet tall ferns, I can see their torchlight panning around. Don't want to scare them so I lie back on my rock and wait for them to leave. Hear descending footfalls, feel nice and cool, decide to go back to my tent. Sit up. Bunch of little kids still standing around me as I slowly sat up like Frankenstein's monster. They lose their shit, before I can say a thing, they have bolted down the hill. So I think in my wretched, recovering state, I was probably talking in my sleep and some kids in the park heard me and went over to investigate. I'm 6 feet 2, spooky skeletal mode, so lying down in the dark, if they weren't actually standing on me I wouldn't have noticed. They would have seen a big weirdo with an unkempt beard appear out of nowhere. It's a long shot, but if anyone reads this, and has a kid who saw a ghost at Beaumont last June, I'm really sorry.
Have you guys ever dealt with a massive flock of birds sitting above you in the woods? Had this happen to me yesterday. I was getting ready to sleep alone in a pine forest. I started to hear an unusual amount of birds up in the tree tops but didn't think anything of it until it got pitch dark out. I get out of my hammock to take a piss and shine my light up into the tree tops. Then a shit ton of birds started flying around. It was loud. It sounded like thousands of birds flapping their wings all around me. It was really scary because I couldn't see more than 10 feet with my Walmart headlamp. I barely even made out their shadows. I felt like they were all going to attack my light. They even started shitting all over my tarp after I riled them up. When I looked down with my headlamp, and away from the birds, they would fly really close to me. It's almost like they weren't registering me as a predator like they do during daylight because they couldn't see me very well. I cleaned the shit off my tarp, packed up on the spot, and drove home. This forest in particular is the only pine forest within probably 50 miles, so I think it might be a treasure trove for migratory birds or something.
Hiking Appalachian Trail with 2 female cousins and my mom. Set up camp for the night near a fire watchtower. At around 2 a.m., a guy walks up to the tower and starts pacing around talking to himself. I tell my family I'm going to talk to him. They tell me to just pretend we're asleep and not get involved. He climbs up and down the watchtower a few times. Last time he comes down and paces around our tent. Police show up and start talking to him. They escort him away. I got out to talk to one of the police officers that was still there, and apparently the dude was trying to self-end and was just recently released from a psych ward. He had planned to take his life by hanging on the tower, but didn't want to ruin our trip. The only thing that made it scary for me was everyone freaking while at the same time telling me not to do anything.
Got a couple that might be paranormal but were probably just my imagination. Got a few very real ones, though. They me. Camping in the mountains in California with a friend. Getting pretty dark. Hear movement outside camp. Look over, see strange-looking dude holding what looks like a knife in one hand. He's approaching us. Stops when he sees the rifle in my lap and the one in friend's lap. Turns 360 and walks away. Friend decides she wants to sleep and shift, I agree. Get no sleep and nearly crash car on the way home next day. Good times. That's the only time I've ever had anything weird happen in that area, so I still frequent it. I used to camp in Mendocino National Forest a bit, but that whole forest gives me sinister vibes. Not great. One for Mendocino. Me, with different friend. Hiking in Innawoods in Mendocino National Forest. Overnight gear and car, wearing Alice LBEs and other cobbled together webbing, carrying rifles. Come across busted up old pickup parked off side of trail. As we're approaching to pass it, dude comes running up out of the bushes next to the truck. Stops on side of the trail. We stop. He's wearing pretty normal clothes, but he's got a dark stain of some sort over the front of him. Stare at each other for a long moment. Friend breaks silence for some dumb reason. Hey, dude responds, hey, normal tone of voice. You good? Yeah, alrighty then. Continue down trail. Look over shoulder. He's staring at us. Round a bend, get out of sight. Go cross country to get on a different trail and head back to car. Thought maybe he was staring at us for being autistic LARPers, but looking back on it, we were just wearing webbing over normal hiking clothes. I think I had an REI hoodie and jeans on or some normie shit like that. Weird ass place. I'm in my second year of working for the Ontario Park Service as a manual laborer, and the fun vastly outweighs the bad, as long as you treat it like it's a job and not summer camp with chores. You get to work on time, you work until your shift is over, you do what you're told, and then you get to go home and you have the rest of the day to do whatever you want basically. It's a pretty sweet gig if you love nature, and they're pretty laid back for the most part as long as you don't perform and theatrical screw-ups. You also gotta understand that you are in a workplace 24/7, so acting like an idiot has real repercussion and seriously can damage your workplace relationships. If you can stomach shoveling dog shit off the ground and digging a hole in sweltering heat, it'll be a grand old time. Drinking and smoking weed is pretty common too, so trad nerds beware, but no one is gonna force you to do anything, so you should be okay regardless. Also, you will vomit at some point in your job. Everyone vomits once or twice, it's just a fact. For maintenance, you literally just have to have 4 appendages and a functional brain. Interior, who are the guys who travel into the woods to clean trails and dig P3s and treasure boxes, require that you have extensive backcountry experience before. Usually people on interior work 2 to 3 years maintenance at a park before they go into interior, because then the assistant super and superintendent know that they aren't just bullshitting and they actually know what they are doing. In my opinion, I would never want to work interior because it isn't it's a big camping trip with chores. No, you are literally hiking all day, 10 to 12 hours a day, for 7 days straight, carrying a chainsaw and bush cutting equipment in addition to your standard equipment. And they don't let you use personal equipment. You have to use the equipment provided by the park, because then they know what they're giving you should be enough for you to operate. We have a lot of MSR equipment here, but that's because they gave us a bulk discount. Also, interior is one painful ass position, because once you finish a trip, you have 3 days to get back into order before you go again. Something about portaging 5 kilometers and then having to turn around and walk back to grab 2 sacks of gravel, a chainsaw, and a jerrycan of gas really messes with you. Maintenance is pretty alright though, you just gotta deal with some pretty gross shit sometimes if you're a student. The worst I gotta do is follow around the shit truck guy with a set of keys and unlock the vault toilet hatches so he can suck up all the sewage to go dump it at the tile bed and sewage lagoon.
Was in a woods tripping on shrooms. As the sun faded me and bro started walking back to the car, but being inebriated we took forever. Some idiot had his dog off leash and it ran up behind me, damn near brained it with my stick. It looked like a wolf. The owner acted all pissy about it until he saw our rifles. I'll never forget how much of a coward he was after that. Called the cops, but luckily he was pretty cool and somehow didn't know we were tripping or didn't care. We only brought the rifles because the year before me and another bro found a satanic-looking altar out there, a pentagon tree root stained brown, dark red with a bunch of voodoo-looking bullshit hanging in the trees nearby. That year most of the forest seemed to be withering, and after we found the altar we kept hearing a small girl's voice crying out for help, but it kept coming from different directions. As the sun was going down, my dumb friend got scared and bolted off in a random direction, and I had to tard wrangle him over a barbed wire fence to get back to a main road. I stopped hanging out with him after that. Never knew if it was some entity or just a bunch of kids messing with us, but I damn well brought my broomstick every time I went back. It was a decently big plot of land behind an old deaf school. I used to have an apartment that was set back on the edge of those woods, and the whole building was definitely haunted, but not in any spooky way. I'm so tired of this paranormal shit, bros. I just moved halfway across the US to a trailer park and my neighbor acts like she's possessed. Old lady with brain damage that beats on the walls next to wherever I am at 2:59 a.m. every single night and speaks to herself in different voices.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.